Hey everybody. So for this week's video, we are back with Kay Rowe. Now, I did a podcast with her a few weeks ago, and it was absolutely fascinating talking about Scientology fundraising and the International Association of Scientologists. But then we also spent the last part of the interview getting into why it was that Kay Rowe left the Sea Org in the first place, or, in the last place, really. Due to some medical situations that came up, and we got just barely scratched the surface of getting into a pretty horrifying state of affairs and conditions with how Scientology and the Sea Org specifically deals with people who get sick, ill, have chronic long-term conditions, and the care that they get. I've been asked questions about this, all the time, and in talking with Kay offline in a recent conversation we had, she really jarred my memory on a few things that I had forgotten about from life in the Big Blue at the Pac Base. And so I thought, hey, let's get together again and let's actually just focus on this topic and see what we come up with on this. So, hi, Kay. Thanks for being on board here again.
Hi, Chris.
So I think what we want to do is, first off, if anybody has not seen the interview that I did with Kay, you'll have to go back to the Sensibly Speaking podcast and check it out, and I will put the link to that below in the description to this video. But so catch up on that, because you'll want to have that information as well. But so first off now, Kay, with when you and I talked in our last interview about your medical experience and how difficult it was for you to get medical treatment, and eventually that actually led to you leaving the Sea Org, because you had a condition with your feet. Is that right?
Yeah.
What?
There were other things, but
yeah, sort of just summarize what that was all about.
The first thing I had a surgery on was my feet, but it took 10 years before I had the surgery.
Okay.
And then I had been diagnosed with fibroids 10 years before they actually got addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were nothing major at the time, but I kept on being sent to free clinics and just the cheap route because I kept on having all these abdominal pains and what have you. And the whole entire time, it was the fibroids that had grown to 8 pounds.
Right, right.
That were totally missed because I wasn't getting quality medical care. I was just going the cheap route, going to free clinics and the university hospital and what have you.
Right. Do you think that your experience that you described in our podcast and just now, do you think that's typical for Sea Org members?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I unfortunately have to concur from my own, what I observed and experienced myself. I had some really chronic back pain, and the extent of help I got from the Sea Org on that, because I have a bent back, scoliosis, pretty bad case of it actually, and the extent of care on that was to go to the chiropractic college down the road, where interns could, intern chiropractors could crack my back for free. So that was not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think, though, that, now knowing with the benefit of hindsight, right? We can talk about, the ordeals that we went through, and they were pretty horrific. But looking at the bigger picture, why do you think this kind of thing goes on? What is the attitude of Scientology towards people who get sick and develop chronic illnesses or conditions?
Well, having been on some of the financial planning committees and seeing what they go through when they have to make a decision as to where the funds are going to go, honestly, I don't think that the people there in the organization at the level that the staff member is at, I don't think that those people are the ones that are intentionally not funding. I think they're under so much stress to send a certain amount of money up the line to the church hierarchy that they have to make do with what they have.
Right. how when you were in those FP meetings, and I was in them as well, and at various times, and that happens every week, by the way, just to kind of explain this. Every week on Thursday night, because the week ends for Scientology on Thursday at 2 o'clock. So that evening, the income that's made for the last week, since the last Thursday, is sort of all put together, and then it has to get figured out as to where it's going to go. What are they going to spend the money on? And there are certain fixed percentages of that total income, or the gross income, that are already allocated for things like sending up the line to international management for various purposes. There's payments to Flag just for management support. There's for service organizations, they show films and they have to lease those films from Golden Era Productions, and they have to pay for that, and various and sundry payments that end up going up the line. What sort of things did you see money going to that medical payments were not being made or set aside because of, money had to go to other things instead? Like, what kind of other things?
Well, it was those things that you just said, right? But it was also just the things that the organization had to pay in order to just operate, completely aside from sending money up the line. I mean, they had utilities that had to be paid. They had to pay management for the rent for the building that they were in.
Right. The Sea Org building.
That's what I mean, because the buildings were owned, right?
Yep.
But they had to actually pay for the use of the building. That's from what I recall. I might be totally wrong on it, but I don't think so.
I think for the Sea Org organizations, I think you're absolutely right. I've been asked about the new ideal orgs, and I'm like 99.9% sure that they are not paying rent for the buildings that they do the fundraising for and then buy outright. But the Sea Org organizations, I think you're absolutely right. They have some kind of rent or lease payments.
Right. So basically, their attention would be on first priority. It was like not even negotiable. Anything that was supposed to go up the lines had to go up the lines. That was first priority, right?
Yep.
And then they had the things that we're going to get shut off and we can't even operate if we don't pay. So then those were the next things. And they'd have to adjudicate what they were going to spend the money on based on what were the most urgent things that they couldn't get around. It's like they had to pay for paper. They had to have food for the crew. That kind of thing. So the things that would generally get cut would be things like uniform parts and medical. Medical was just that the solution was find another way to handle it.
Right. And oftentimes those other ways were just sloughing off people to, do Scientology assists on each other, or, that sort of thing. It was a very sort of unsympathetic attitude towards people.
Or find the free way to do it. And the free method of doing it were the free clinics, and they were using the university hospitals.
Right.
Where, the staff literally sometimes have to stay in the emergency room around the clock, pick a number, and wait to be seen. And then they get a real quick in and out, incomplete diagnosis, because they don't go, when you're like the freebie guy going in there, they don't do every possible test and really get down to the bottom line of exactly what's going on with you. They just do just a real quick look over you and ask you what's happening, where are you hurting? Okay, let me look at that. Okay, well, here's what we think. Boom. You're out of there in a few minutes.
That's right.
After you've been waiting for hours, then you're out after a few minutes.
Yeah, well, and you can't really blame the emergency rooms for that, because for the most part they are there for matters of immediate life and death.
Exactly. And they do what is called triage. Yeah.
Right. That's what they're there for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the higher level of medical care, that if it's not killing you right now, then it's not really, the emergency room's task to deal with long-term medical care. They're just trying to save immediate life. And so if you don't have an immediately life-threatening thing, then okay, good, out you go, and here's some aspirin, or here's whatever's going to deal with that for now. And then
Yeah.
that ends up being the totality of care that you get. Maybe one other thing we might want to clarify also is, there's this there's a correct idea, and I mean, and we talked about it in the fundraising podcast. There's a tremendous amount of money that comes into Scientology, but a lot of that money, especially these days, is the straight donations, the fundraising money.
Exactly.
And the organizations we're talking about right now are the service orgs, where their money comes in based on how much auditing or counseling they're selling or how much training they're selling. And these guys are not very viable operations, which is why when you look at how much money is the Church of Scientology making and where is it making it from, the vast bulk of it is coming from these straight donations that where people are sat down and just appealed to give money for the cause.
Right. And see, those donations aren't allowed to be used for the financial planning.
Exactly. None of that money is ever seen by those service organizations.
Yep.
And so it just doesn't even count. So, and we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars just flowing straight up to the top. And none of that is going to crew welfare or to medical situations. So
exactly.
So that's where you get this sort of strange dichotomy of this very rich Church of Scientology, and yet the staff are all paupers, and there's no money for them. And there was legitimately, for their organization and the way the finances are put together, there is no money for them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been in the financial planning committees at the Continental office when they only had enough money for the food allotment for maybe $1.70 per person per day.
Right.
They have to stretch $1.70 per person between 3 meals.
That's right. And the management guys, who run the galley and have to do all the food purchasing for the entire base, get these meager sums from the service organizations, and then, then the crew of the service organizations end up hating the galley crew, but the galley crew are doing their best to stretch this tiny, paltry amount of money that they're getting so they can feed everybody. And this is where, this is where rice and beans comes from. This is where the runny eggs come from. I mean, this is, because they just don't have the money for it. And yet David Miscavige is running around eating, 5-star steak meals.
Right.
So, with a personal chef, by the way, the guy has,
And see, I've worked in the galley, so I've seen it, right? And those people are very, very dedicated to serving the staff as healthy a meal as they possibly can, but they can only go so far with the funds that they get.
That's right. It's a really vicious little circle that goes on in the Sea Org. But there is another aspect to this, which is let's tackle this directly, which is the attitude towards people who have an illness. What was your experience with this? Because I can talk about mine, but what was yours?
I know one of the reasons why I really held my guns on leaving is I felt the resentment. I felt scorned. Like I was held in contempt because I was not fit to do the around-the-clock routines and, stay up late and get up early and short meal breaks. I couldn't do the menial labor. I couldn't get on my hands and knees and stuff. So there were all these exceptions that were having to be made for me, and I would just feel it, and I'd even overhear little snide comments, in the background, like, what makes her so special? She can do, whatever. What's her problem,
That's right.
And I'd even have little snide comments come out sometimes when I would, be face to face with somebody, an executive that was getting pissy with me, where they basically tell me that I was useless and worthless. And I mean, I was actually told that.
Yeah, it's
You know,
harsh. It gets very harsh.
I'm not earning my keep, and you know, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're being told this in the face of 10, 15 years of service in the Sea
Well, it was
organization.
actually 30.
30. Right.
It was 30, 35 years on staff, and
Right.
I was already into over 20 years in the Sea Org, I was being told that.
Right.
So I had already been served for at least 30 years total to the Church of Scientology, and I was being told stuff like that.
Yeah. It's not a pleasant environment.
Yeah.
Now Hubbard actually wrote some things that also contribute to this. I mean, there's the group, survival and people being snippy and people being weird because everybody's kind of under this pressure and gun and abuse. But then there's also just a lot of this stems, I think, from Hubbard's policies and the bulletins that he wrote about this condition, PTSness. What do you think about that?
Oh, it was automatically assumed that if you had any weakness, any kind of condition, even if it wasn't really an illness, like in my case, I had bunions, right? That you were PTS.
And what is that? What does that mean? Explain that.
That means that you are connected with somebody that is a suppressive person who is creating stress. And because of that stress, because all illness and accidents, et cetera, and follow-ups, according to Hubbard, are due to stress, to having a situation where you're connected to basically a suppressive person.
Right.
And it could even be someone in present time who reminds you of a suppressive person that you were connected to in the past.
Right. That's right. They call that the restimulated suppressive person.
Exactly. So they were constantly searching for who was I connected to that was a suppressive person, and they would always get into my family. Except my family never tried anything to get me out. They always kept their lips sealed and just kind of let me go with it. Every once in a blue moon, I'd hear a little yap, but nothing major, nothing to get worried about.
Right.
The real thing that was going on with me that was causing the stress was the environment that I was working in.
Exactly.
But you weren't allowed to say that, because then it would mean that, oh, you're false PTS.
Yep.
Because you're naming a good hat, the suppressive. And so therefore, you're the bad guy, and you've committed some sins, or you have some secrets that us good guys over here don't know about, and that's why you're sick, or that's why you had your accident. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. It's always got some twist on it where it comes back on you. It's always coming back to you. Because it could never be that the suppressive person in your environment that was suppressing you was the person who just said you were useless after 20, 30 years of service. Right?
Exactly.
Even though that is clearly suppression, right? And if your mother was telling you that, oh my God, she's totally an SP. How could that be? She's totally invalidating you, and you got to disconnect from your mother right away. But if it's your senior in the Sea Org doing it, oh yeah, no, you're just false PTS. We're not even accepting that answer.
Right.
Right. It can never be David Miscavige. It can never be L. Ron Hubbard.
Right. And interestingly enough, like no sooner did I walk out the door, I started getting better.
Right.
As soon as I officially was out of the Sea organization,
yep.
Kaboom! I was like a happy person, and I was feeling good and feeling I could conquer things, and I had confidence and all that. It was like I went through this, I don't even know, this time warp or something. Something bizarre happened where just leaving that environment completely shifted everything for me.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? That,
Yeah.
I mean, it really does say a lot about the stress factor in one's environment or in one's life, and how by just curtailing that, just reducing now those stress levels, it just brings so much physical relief. You know,
Hmm.
it's amazing. It really is quite something. Um, okay, now, uh, did you ever have anybody accuse you of faking it?
Not necessarily directly, but it was definitely insinuated.
What happened with that? How did that go down?
It would be kind of like, well, what is it now, Kay? Now what?
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
know? And I mean, I even was approved on a medical schedule. I had already gone to bed, um, and somebody came up to my dorm to get me out of bed and said the name of some executive that I didn't recognize. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in trouble if I don't go, because they're saying Mr. So and so,
Right.
right,
Right.
is ordering me down to, you know, this building, right?
Yep.
So I go down there, and it's somebody from the estates org
Basically
who
that
was
basically that's like
who was
somebody from the
saying,
janitorial crew. You know what I
right,
mean? It's
right, the
like that.
janitorial saying, you're an officer here, and you're these you're responsible for this entire space, even if it's not your personal space, and the people in your area haven't cleaned, and so therefore you're the one that's responsible because you're the officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of looked at her, and she had a security guy with her. She didn't see this one coming. I looked right at her and I told her to go to hell, basically, in so many words. I
Wow.
said, how dare you? How dare you? I'm on a medical schedule. How dare you trick somebody into coming up to my dorm to get me out of bed to handle some issue that there's all these other quote unquote officers around here you could be having this conversation with, but for some reason you picked me, right? I don't see you having a chat with them.
Right.
You went out of your way to go and pull me out of bed. I said, and I told her, I said, just who the hell do you think you are that you can do that to me? I
Uh,
said, I'm just curious, did you actually talk to my senior
wow.
and get that person's okay to do that before you did that? And I just turned around and I walked away.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Now, was that Rebecca Fear?
No, it was her junior. I cannot for the life of me remember what her name
Oh,
was. You know who I'm
Natasha.
talking about? Natasha. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Natasha.
Natasha. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. That's
I
pretty.
said some other things, but I'm not going to repeat them
No, it's all good.
on the video. But I just see, I was already to that point where I actually didn't care if I got in trouble for lipping off.
Pretty.
I
That's
was
that's pretty
so
clear. Yeah.
beyond. I was like, you know what? Don't go there with me.
Right. That's definitely late stage fed upness.
Yeah.
Because
I
normally in the
mean,
Sea Org, you start mouthing off like that, and you're going to be scrubbing pots for the rest of the night.
oh yeah. But see, I had an earlier incident with her, which
Oh,
is where a couple, but this one in particular, whereas I went to an event and we were all gathering in the event hall to, the shrine, and she literally comes behind me and pushes me so hard I almost got a whiplash. No kidding, right? And
wow.
as she's pushing me, she says, "Move your fat ass." She says this to me, right? If it hadn't been for the fact that I had another Sea Org member standing next to me that was a friend of mine, I probably would have taken her by the scruff of her neck and lifted her right off the floor. I was so pissed.
Yep.
I turned around, and man, if looks could kill, she would have been dead.
Yep.
It's like, how dare you? And I
There's
didn't say anything, right? I zipped it. So when this thing happened, I'm like, I'm going to let her have it full force.
Yeah, there's a lot of little power games that go on in the Sea Org, and there's people who who feel entitled, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to treat other people like shit, and they learn it from other people who treat people like shit. I mean,
Yeah.
I am positive Natasha learned a lot of her attitudes because she, by herself, was a pretty nice person, but when she got around that other woman I was mentioning, Rebecca Fear,
Becca. Yeah.
you know, she just started acting like her, and Rebecca Fear was hell on wheels. She was an
Oh
absolute
yeah.
tyrant, you know,
Oh yeah.
and she was in charge of the estates organization, and it was just routine to walk past her office and have her reaming somebody out. Just every day that went on, and she just wandered around the base and just like lit into people. And this was just how she dealt with people, and she was not going to be stopped in doing that. And it was just absolutely bizarre. I mean, I look back on it now, and I have no explanation for it at all, except that she was completely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I noticed that there were certain people that would take advantage of the fact that they had some braid on them, you know, because you had
Right.
the Sea Org uniforms with the military braids, and
That's right.
they had rank and they were an officer and whatever, right? And I got to the point where more than once, when somebody would call me on, how dare you talk to me that way, whatever, I'd turn around and look at them and I'd say, how dare you talk to me that way?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
I've been here working for you for almost 35 years, and you have the gall to treat me like dirt, like I'm just a cog in the wheel. You know what? No, you don't get to do that with me.
Right.
I go, and I don't care how many stripes you have on your shoulder.
That's
Earn your
right.
stripes. If you want my respect, then act respectful.
No, it's absolutely true. It's a real culture of fear, because I'm sitting here thinking about this right now, realizing that if only a couple more people had responded that way to that kind of abusive behavior, it actually would have curbed it. It actually
Yeah,
would have put a
true.
stop to it. You know, it really didn't take. I mean, I'm just kind of thinking about this whole environment and the way it was run. And, you know, the pressure was one thing, and there was a tremendous amount of pressure being put on people all the time. And a lot of excuses made, at least in my mind, because of that pressure. But the fact of the matter is, you're absolutely right that at any time, any of us could have said, you know what, just no. Just no. You're not going to talk to me like that. I'm not going to deal with it. No. You
Yeah.
know, and if enough people had actually, you know, stood their ground on that, that would have stopped that. But, you know, but it's hard because you have ranks, you have ratings, you have this disciplinary thing, and you're indoctrinated from word one that you are no backflash, you know?
Oh yeah.
That's
And
the,
when you're the one, that does it, you're the one that's now under a magnifying glass, and they're looking for any possible thing.
yep.
Your statistics dip just a little teeny bit, and it's like, go get her now.
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right. Any excuse, and
Yeah.
and the pettiness and all of the nonsense that goes on, the infighting and the power plays and all that stuff. Like anything that you might think goes on in like corporate America or goes on in any kind of job situation, kind of magnify that about 50 times, and that's life in the Sea Org. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
Sad but true.
yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's get back to the medical stuff now. When
Yes.
on a, you know, we were on a base with like what, about 1,000 people or something.
I think if you include
Altogether.
Celebrity Center and what have you, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that. And yeah,
So who do they put in charge of medical?
boy, the it was so teeny and so hard to understand, and it was ripped apart so many times that it was hard to tell if there was even anybody there at all. I just remember one particular person was Joan, and I think she was for the Continental Liaison Office.
Yep.
But she was also the senior person over all the individual ones, because each organization was supposed to have their own medical officer.
That's right.
Like the Advanced Organization and the American St. Hills were each supposed to have their own, and then Celebrity Center would have their own, and what have you. And Joan was like the one that oversaw them to some degree, but then she was very, very specifically focused on the management office staff.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
And she had a deputy at one time, and then that deputy got pulled away
Yeah, exactly. We'll get back to
Because
that one.
she was a mouthy person like me.
Exactly. Now, did you, from your experience, did these medical people, now they're called, the actual post title in Scientology is called the Medical Liaison Officer, or
Right,
MLO, right?
right.
And that's
Yes,
because they're not doctors per se, but they're liaising with hospitals or care centers or whatever to get the people, under them the care that they're supposed to be receiving. So there's that
exactly.
liaison is the word that gets used in Scientology all the time for that. Um, but often, especially with what we just talked about with the finances being the way they were the ones who were having to figure out some kind of medical solution or handling for the people, who they were dealing with. They were responsible for the isolation room. There was one
Mm-hmm.
for males, one for females, where if you got
Right.
sick with something that was at all considered contagious, boom, you were up to ISO. And,
Mm-hmm.
the MLO was the one who was supposed to bring the food up there and supposed to keep the place clean and supposed to get people better. But, I mean, did you ever see any MLOs who had any real medical training? Because I didn't.
None.
Yeah. I mean, they were just winging it. They had a, medical handbook or WebMD or something, and they were just kind of struggling along trying to figure out how to get people better.
Yeah, and maybe at some point they got some CPR training. They went to like
Right.
some little seminar or something like that for that, but they certainly weren't highly skilled in the area, you
No.
know. And then they were up to their eyeballs. I mean, there if you had a whole bunch of people sick, there were usually not enough rooms for them, and the places weren't clean, and people weren't getting cared for, and then she'd be responsible to get them transported. And how do you, if they have to go to the doctor, you're trying to like bounce all these people around and fit it all together and make sure people got rides. Quite often I ended up having to take a bus,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'd have to have somebody else go with me, and I'd have to take a bus, to get to a hospital. So it would end up
Right.
taking me hours
Right.
just to
Right.
get there, hours waiting, and then hours to get back.
Now here's something that's really ironic about this. The
Mm-hmm.
Church of Scientology, the Sea Org base, is the former Cedars-Sinai Hospital complex, and it is located literally across the street from a children's hospital and two or three other major medical facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could walk across the street and be in a hospital. You could walk across
Right.
another street and be in another hospital. They're Kaiser hospitals.
Yeah, exactly. Except they don't have insurance, and they don't have finances for Kaiser. So you have to go the free clinic route. You have to go to the university hospitals where they have interns that work on you, so that you don't have to pay for the service.
That's right. So here's a multi-billion-dollar organization that is sending its hard-working workers who have dedicated literally their lives to the cause.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not sending them across the street where they'll get good care and come right back, in a day or two and generally be fine. They will never do that. They will instead send them, take them off post for days, weeks on end, going to free care, not getting the care they need, continuing the problem, making it actually chronic. It's mind-boggling when you just sort of step back and think about it. But when you're in it, I don't know, did you ever think about this stuff? Because I never did. I never felt like I had the time to think about any of this.
I didn't, actually, because I thought I was very much into the frame of mind of, we're saving a planet, and so we need to scrimp and save and, not waste any money.
Right.
I mean, I can't even believe I just said that word, waste. I mean, why would money for medical be a waste on the people that are the whole reason why you're even there, and the reason you're even surviving and even have your doors open is because of those people.
Right.
I know. And then on top of it, you would still be expected to do your posts and everything, despite being, unless you were contagious.
Right.
But if you weren't contagious, you were still expected to be on post and to be making your quotas and what have you.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you how
You
many
know,
how many
there was
sickness.
no mercy.
No, no,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many days I was just on post sick, just sick,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you try to even hide it because you didn't want to go to ISO,
Right.
because ISO was kind of its own little hell, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, there was a time where I would even go out on tours when it was known that I was contagious.
Wow, wow.
I mean, and you look at that, so that's potentially I could be infecting an entire plane load of people
Mm-hmm.
with my fever or my flu.
Wow, you're flying around. Pretty crazy. Well, we kind of covered why it is that why they're so stingy in terms of paying for quality medical care. Do you have any other ideas on that before we go on to the next thing as to why, you know, the Sea Org is so uncaring toward its own staff?
You know, a thought did occur to me, and I'll tell you this
Mm-hmm.
because in just looking at the ideal orgs as a just that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ideal orgs are set up with technology, with all these bells and whistles and all this audio visual equipment and what have you,
Mm-hmm.
that make it unnecessary to have people.
Hmm.
I mean, it's the machine age, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you have the machine age going on in Scientology, and they don't have to have somebody to sit down and talk to a person about this and explain this and that, because all the person has to do is walk in and go to a bunch of machines and push a button, and he can watch a video and then move on to the next machine and the next machine. For all I know, they even have an automatic thing where people can fill out their personality tests, and a robot will tell them what the results are. I mean, I don't know. They might actually have that by now.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me
You
if
know?
they were to come up with that, because Miscavige certainly doesn't like people. And it was doing everything he could to remove people off of, you know, every line that he could. You know, you were supposed to get sold on services with a TV, you know, giving you
Yeah.
briefings on all the services and all these audio visual things. That's absolutely right. It was supposed to replace the people who were actually the reason that people were coming into Scientology all through the 60s and 70s and 80s, was because they walked in and somebody sat down and talked to them. And Miscavige was like, yeah, no, get rid of that. That's no, you know. And then he would say that didn't work. That wasn't, you know, that wasn't getting people in, and so this is why we have to do this new thing. And it was totally backwards.
Yeah.
Know?
And the other thing too is that there's a lot of stress I noticed on getting new young recruits.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when you have people that are new and they're young and they're in their early teens, maybe even as young as 14 years old if their parents give parental consent, they have like a long timeline of years of work that they can do for the church. So the older folks, it's kind of like, whatever.
Right? They don't really,
know?
yeah, they don't seem to matter much. And they're certainly
No.
they're certainly not regarded as individual people. You know, if you can't get any work done during the day, or can only be on a medical schedule, which means you have to, you know, secure at 7 or 8 o'clock at night or some whatever your schedule is, the resentment is almost, it's palpable.
Oh yeah. The people that are held in the highest regard are the ones with a lot of energy, that are able to stay up around the clock, and that are producing and making their quotas, right?
Yep.
And they're all full of energy, and they're all excited, and they're all, you know, exuberant and just devoted, and they're zealots, right? They're all just completely charged up about how exciting this whole mission is. And the older ones, they've kind of lost their enthusiasm, you know, and they've got all their aches and pains, and they can't stay up around the clock unless somebody's willing to face the dire consequences of that person possibly even having a heart attack or having something really bad happen, just because when you start getting that old, you can't just go days and days on end with not having sufficient sleep and not being taken care of.
That's right.
So I felt personally, and I observed this happening to others, that as soon as I got into a situation where I needed medical care and I was coming up on medical lines a lot, any respect that anybody had for me just completely went in the toilet.
That's right. That's exactly
like
right.
I wasn't important anymore. I was a thorn in somebody's side.
Yep. You're a bother. You're a hindrance. You're
Yep.
the DevT, Scientology term. Develop
Mm-hmm.
traffic, Oh,
Yep.
K, DevT. I don't have time for that, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
And I'd even get threatened with being, put on the rehabilitation project force and that kind of thing. I get those
Really?
threats every once in a while because I wasn't being productive enough. Not because I was committing any crimes or doing anything that a lot of people would get, put on for, like having affairs and doing financial crimes and that kind of thing. I never did any stuff like that, right?
Right.
But just because I wasn't making a quota that they wanted me to make, even if my statistics were actually rising,
Yep.
just because I wasn't making a specific quota, I would be getting threatened.
Wow.
More than once, many times in my in the last few years I was there, I was threatened with
Wow.
being put on the rehabilitation project force. And I thought to myself, if that was to happen, I would have absolutely I would have left. I would have routed out. I would have completely and utterly would send, okay, good. Who do I need to see? What do I need to sign? I'm not doing the program. Sorry.
Yep.
Bye.
And that would have absolutely been the right choice. Did yeah, what was I going to say? It's just that pressure, it's hard to explain that pressure, but that's motivation in the Sea Org, is threat, domination, punishment. That's motivation for the Sea Org. And it only got worse over the years that I was in. I joined the Sea Org in 95. You went in much earlier than that. But I noticed over the years that it got worse and worse and worse and worse as time went on with that. Did you experience that, or what did you think?
Oh, absolutely. I remember before Miscavige was visible, when I was in the Continental Liaison office, I felt like I could actually sit down with my senior and have a talk with him. I felt like there were people there that I could just let my hair down with them and let them know, hey, this is what I'm running into. This is something that's driving me around the bend. I don't know how to solve it. And somebody would be willing to sit down with me and actually help me work it out, right?
Right.
But the more and more the years went on, and the more and more David Miscavige, this is my observation in hindsight, because I didn't really know who was doing what for a long time. But as soon as he was very, very directly on the lines, and you had like, it was like going into like the late 80s, the early 90s, and then it kept getting steeper and steeper and steeper and crazier. There was no opportunity to actually be able to sit down and talk to your senior and to actually have a civil conversation. It was like any kind of conversation like that was considered you're being an insubordinate. You're talking back. You're giving me a problem. Get the hell out of here. Go do what you're told. So everybody was just expected to just follow orders. And if you didn't, then there would be penalties. And it was just threats, more punishments, and it was just overwhelming.
Yeah, that point about that's a very good point about the thing about you're being a problem. I can't even tell you how many times I was told that. Or make it go right. Just figure it out.
Yeah.
I ain't got time for you. Figure it out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now let's hit on another topic here related. Did you ever see what happened when Sea Org members got cancer?
Well, what I did notice just in this one particular instance that I personally observed is they're hidden away.
Exactly.
They're not.
That's right.
it's not broadly publicized that anybody is dying or has cancer. It's just this hidden thing. And unless you're rooming with them, which is what ended up happening with me, I was recovering from a surgery, so I ended up rooming with somebody who was in 4th stage cancer.
Yep.
And you knew her.
Yep.
Holly,
yeah, we talked about her on the podcast. Yeah.
Right. We didn't know. I didn't know. I was totally shocked when I opened the door and I saw her in there.
Yeah.
Right?
I had no idea, and I worked with her for years. She just disappeared one day.
Yeah.
No idea where, and then suddenly she's dead.
Yeah.
You know.
But I'd seen people besides her. I'd seen people in the hallway. There were certain floors in the building that were medical floors, or they seemed to have a lot of dorms that were for medical. And I'd see people just shuffling around, like literally shuffling, because they could hardly walk in the hallway just to get up out of bed and to move and to get some space. And they would be obviously dying of cancer because they'd have no hair, or they'd be completely like emaciated, and you knew, okay, that person's going soon. But then the thing I could never figure out is that how did it come on so fast, and how come all of a sudden out of the blue this person's dying? And I mean, it was pretty easy to figure out they didn't get proper medical care, because if a person's getting their regular checkups and they're being cared for, and if they have, some kind of symptom and they actually get it addressed and they get to the bottom of what it is, and let's say it is 1st stage cancer, there's no reason why somebody can't survive from 1st stage cancer.
That's right.
Once it's at 4th stage, like, forget it,
And I have a feeling that unfortunately, most cases of cancer, I would be willing to go out on a limb and say most cases of cancer in the Sea Org are probably not even detected until they're at stage 3, or.
I would agree with you. I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
Because I would remember seeing those people on post up until just a few months before I'm seeing them, on the edge of death.
That's right.
So I'm like, I know you don't die from cancer. You don't go from 1st stage to 4th stage and dead in 4 months.
Right. Exactly.
Generally speaking,
That's right.
So yeah.
And they're not getting
total neglect.
Exactly. There's no concept, zero concept in the Sea Org of preventative medicine, of getting a physical every year, of getting yourself checked out. That's just a foreign concept in the Sea Org. You would have to be an extraordinary Sea Org member to make it work to get something like that for yourself, because you would do nothing but run into brick walls trying to make that happen for yourself, even just to get the time off if you paid for everything yourself.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to sound horrible, right? But here's what I actually think. This is my personal viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I think that whoever is the one that is having to make that choice about where the finances go and how it works, that's dictated from way up, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't the guys down there at the Continental office or the service organization going, no way are we going to pay for that person. We don't care about them. That's not those people's attitude. Somebody upstairs is making a call that we're better off just ditching those people.
Pretty much. And
because they're just a ball and a chain in our ankle, and we can just replace them anyway with our machines and with some new recruits. So
that's right.
It's not the correct investment of our finances.
Right. And this is an organization that lives and dies, I guess you could say, or lives on, people who make it money. And I know of 3 people right now off the top of my head. There was Enid Byrne, there was Morton Astrupgard, there was what I think High Levy also out in Clearwater, right? They all died of cancer. I'm not positive about High Levy because I wasn't in Clearwater, but I think he died of cancer.
I think he did. And then there's Charmaine.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And Charmaine
I don't know what she died of.
Yeah.
But
Enid Byrne had been a salesperson, a registrar at the
Oh
advanced
yeah.
organization in
Mhm.
Big Blue for what, 20 years? I mean, she
At
knew
least. At
everyone.
least.
Everyone knew Enid, and she
Mhm.
made millions of dollars for the Church of Scientology. Like, not even a question that she was personally responsible for millions and millions of dollars into the church's coffers over the years, selling the OT levels. And her thanks for that was to die alone in a room, not being properly cared for with cancer,
Mhm.
and not being, and no one, really even knowing about it until after she was dead. I don't even know that people got the cause after she died. It was just suddenly Enid was gone, and then Enid was dead, and
Right.
and her memorial
Oh, I
service.
know. I was totally. Oh, I was just like, huh?
Yeah, and no, and there wasn't even like, well, she died of cancer. That wasn't even the thing. It was just she dropped her body, right?
Right. Oh,
And
there's another one to add to the list. Ruthie Silverman.
oh my God, that's absolutely right. She was walking around with a
She
little
died of
air
cancer.
tank at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she had that little
Yeah.
bottle of oxygen she was walking around with.
I would actually say that probably the majority of the deaths, um, not just in the Sea organization, probably even the people that went way way high up the bridge in Scientology. A lot of people died. Even Gene Denk, who was L. Ron Hubbard's auditor,
That's
medical
right.
officer or whatever, his
That's right.
personal doctor, didn't he die of cancer too?
I can't be sure on
I'm
that one.
pretty. I'm not sure, but I thought. I mean, there's a lot of people.
There, for sure
It
there
just
is.
it's just got to make you wonder.
It does. And I'll tell you one thing about that, because I get asked this question also. How come so many OTs die of cancer? Well, look at how many of them are smoking like chimneys. Because Ruthie Silverman, I mean, I never saw her without a cigarette in her mouth until I saw her
True.
carrying around a bottle of oxygen, and that was when she was, literally about a week away from dying. And,
Wow.
Enid, I mean, Morton, I mean, these guys smoked like chimneys, you know? All right. Well, anyway, so cancer, just wanted to kind of talk about that specifically because yeah, they do get hidden away. They are just off, they disappear. And then a few months later, one for one. I don't know, I can't think of one person I know in the Sea Org who beat cancer. Do you know anyone?
No, I don't know of anybody that got some rigorous treatment at stage
Nope.
one and then survived. I don't know of any.
I don't know one.
No, not one, not one.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
okay, and just to wrap up on this, let's go ahead and talk about that story you told me about the deputy MLO, the deputy medical liaison officer,
Oh, okay.
because this is sort of characteristic of the care that and the pressure that goes on and the care that's given to the crew. We had Joan, as you said, who
Yeah.
was the main medical liaison officer, and at one point she got a deputy. Her name was Marsha.
I think it was Marsha. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure it was.
I
Yeah.
think you're right.
And the thing about those two people, right? And pretty much anybody that I ran into that was working as a medical liaison officer is they really did truly care.
Oh, every one of them did. Yeah,
Their hearts went out to the people that they knew that they were responsible for, and they felt really, really bad
that's
when they
right.
couldn't help somebody.
No, I agree with you. I
Yeah.
concur. But they were
So
they were in a truly impossible situation. No money
yeah,
allocated to them. Hardly any money allocated to them.
yeah,
People dying under their watch, right?
yeah.
And the only thing they really had was vitamins, WebMD, and
And
so make the person
more often than
comfortable.
not, they didn't even have the vitamins.
Yeah, and assists. Scientology
Right.
assists, right? So we're gonna like lay hands, which is about as effective as Popoff's laying hands on people. So okay, well, why don't you tell this story about Marsha and what happened with her as the deputy MLO?
Okay. So anyway, I think it was about February, March of 2008. I ended up being removed from my post and put on this DEX program because I wasn't producing enough in the estimation of whoever,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I end up going in there and under protest and everything, and I end up meeting Marsha, and she and I end up bonding, and we end up basically becoming buddies, and we end up doing the program together and helping each other get through it and everything. So of course, she ends up hearing my whole long, sad story, and I hear hers. And long and short of it is the reason why she ended up being assigned to the program, this is as far as I recall, I don't recall every single detail, was because she put up a fuss when she was told that she needed to spend a good portion of her time, her post time, as the deputy medical liaison officer, selling books and materials and doing fundraising.
Yep.
Like she was like literally going to have to split up her already scarce amount of time to actually help people and, you know, do her actual post that she was assigned to, and instead go and be a salesperson.
Right.
Which, number one, she wasn't even trained to do that. But then that's no excuse because you're expected to be able to do anything, even if you're trained or not.
That's right.
And she had like all these people that were under her care, and they were all supposed to be turned over to Joan to just handle herself when Joan was already up to her eyeballs. And she was like, she would even cry about it. That's how upset she was. She was just really, she was torn.
Yep.
And
yeah. There were always certain areas that were the places you would immediately rip people out of, and crew welfare was one of those places. The crew, you know, screw the crew. The crew can make it go right. They can deal with it themselves.
yeah.
And you know, we need more people making money. You know?
Right.
And so you have literally, you know, something like 800,000 people that are being cared for. The health and well-being of these people are being overseen by 2 or 3 people. You know, and you've got the full gamut of everything that could possibly go wrong in any group of people of that size living in close quarters.
Yeah.
And, you know, and when there was a flu bug that came through or some kind of virus or something, I mean, man, there was one time there was this neurovirus that came through, and I think 60-80% of the crew went down. I
know.
I actually did not. I was one of the few who did not get sick with that thing, and it was bad. I mean, we had whole sections of that main building, the building that has the Scientology logo across the top of it.
Oh yeah, I know. I was in it. I was in it during that time. In fact,
Yeah.
I was falsely accused of not reporting myself, of withholding the fact that I was sick, which I didn't, and I was assigned, you know, treason for that. And then I tried to defend myself, and so the condition got increased.
Wow.
And I just got badly beaten up over that one.
Yeah, that was probably the nastiest thing I ever saw rip through the base, because it really.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was within what you would start feeling ill, you'd start feeling nauseous, and then you'd be like, okay, you know, throw up or something. You're like, okay, I think I'm okay, and then about 4 hours later, you were on your back, and you were not getting up for days.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was bad.
That was horrible.
It was
that was the worst thing I ever experienced.
Yeah, we had plastic sheets up in the hallways and cots laid out because there were so many sick people. It was insane, that one.
Yeah, I mean, we had like the couples dorm that would normally you'd just have a couple in there. We would have 6 or 7 people between the beds, and they'd put extra beds in there, and there would be sleeping bags or some kind of something makeshift thing on the floors, and
that was crazy. I was on the RPF when that happened. And we, you know, like I said, it just swept through there just like it did everywhere else. And it was funny how none of us thought to ourselves, you know, at least I didn't, and I never heard anybody else even whisper this. But if all illness, you know, to a greater or lesser degree stems, you know, exclusively and only from a PTS condition, you know, how does it that suddenly overnight 80% of the base is PTS? You know, like you just don't even. I don't know. It's just weird how the cognitive dissonance works that we don't even like question that stuff when it's happening, you know? Anyway, pretty crazy. Did you have, we're going to wrap up here shortly. Were there any other points on this that you would like to make before we do so?
Yeah, actually, just from a fundraising standpoint, in terms of the elderly,
Mm-hmm.
the elderly, not just the elderly, but any Scientologist, whether it was a staff member or a public person or a Sea Org member, regardless of their age, everybody was to some degree looked at as a potential candidate to get funds from.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So you'd have people that came into the Sea Org after they had a pension or an IRA or whatever. They didn't grow up in the Sea Org, but so they've already got a nest egg, right? And maybe they've already got Social Security coming in now that they're 62 or whatever, right?
Yep.
Those people would be milked for whatever they had.
That's right.
And it would be justified that, well, they've got a roof over their head, they've got a uniform on their back, they're getting fed. They don't really need that money that's coming into them every month. So they would be jumped on every time a new release came out. Whenever there was some big quota that had to be made for fundraising, they would be, sweet talked into making a donation.
Yep.
I mean, there was no mercy. It was like their people would go to just the ends of the earth to just make sure they got their quotas met.
That's right. That's right. It always surprised me to hear about that when it happened, and I always thought it was so weird, that these older Sea Org members would be being hit up for inheritance that they, had gotten, or and it wasn't just older Sea Org members with that. If anybody got inheritance, I mean, if you didn't keep it secret, and it was really hard to do that, the Regis were all over you.
Oh yeah, and then you'd be guilt tripped. You'd be guilt tripped into not giving it. Like, what? Why would you even think of not giving it? Exactly. I mean, it would be considered a like something must be really wrong with you, and we need to now interrogate you with an inch of your life to find out what you got going on that you're not willing to just give it all.
That's right.
To the organization.
Yes, good point. Good point on that one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to wrap this up now. And Kay, thank you very much for taking the time to sit and chat with me about this. It's a subject that does not get enough attention. I suspect that there will be something on this covered in Leah's second season of her show. But and this was certainly no effort to preempt that. I'm just saying that there's a lot more to cover about this topic, and I think Leah's going to talk some about it. But I thought, just based on our conversation the other day, this was definitely something we needed to get out there, and it would be of interest, and also of something, just another reason that the Church of Scientology and the Sea Organization really specifically need to change their ways.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because it's not about trying to annihilate Scientology or trying to get rid of people. It's about trying to get them to just be humane, just deal with their people in a straight up manner, and take care of their people, and that sort of thing. Like, is that really? I really just don't think that's too much to ask. Yeah,
I mean, the only way they're going to shift that around is they have to shift the whole way they handle the finances around.
That's right.
And they got to make people important. And if that means that the big checks aren't going to be going up to management, then that's the way it's got to be, because those people, in the lower levels, they need to be taken care of.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming around, folks. And we're going to wrap up now. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Chris.